Today on CityCast Chicago, did you recently get an alarming air quality alert on your phone? Turns out it was a glitch in Chicago, but it got us wondering about how we monitor air quality here. It's Monday, May 5th. I'm Simone Alicea, in for Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. Before we get into air quality, I want to let you know to keep an eye on our feed this week. On Wednesday, we're going to be dropping a special sponsored episode with the Minocqua Visitors Bureau about all the fun things to do in Minocqua, Wisconsin. So keep your eyes peeled and be sure to check it out. But today, we're joined by Trent Ford, the state climatologist and a researcher at the University of Illinois. Trent, welcome to CityCast Chicago.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So the whole reason I reached out to you is because we actually got a question from a listener, also a new CityCast Chicago member, as it turns out, Christine, who had a question about this thing that happened in April where the weather apps for both Google and Apple showed really dangerous air quality in the Chicago area, worse even than what we saw in 2023 when we had that smoke from the Canada wildfires. But as it turns out, everything was fine. Air quality was normal. It was not super dangerous. Can you explain what exactly happened with this glitch?
Yeah, so it looks like the glitch was an issue with the EPA's air quality monitoring system. So if you use pretty much any reasonable, decent quality air quality app, through Apple or Google Play or anything like that, chances are it's going to in some way, shape, or form use direct observations of things like different types of pollutants, particulate matter, NOx and SOx, those kind of things, from these air quality monitors that are all across the country that are run and managed by the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. Normally the EPA will screen and quality control those observations. So the observations are made at a station. Some of them look a lot like weather stations. Some people maybe just walk right past them every single day and not even know that they're there. And then that data is in pretty much in real time uploaded to the cloud and then processed so that it's high quality and then served out. You can get it directly off the EPA's website. And then all of these apps for iPhone and Android, they pull it down, they make the nice, pretty maps, and then they serve it out. And so it looks like this was an issue with data quality where it's not unusual to get a bad observation every once in a while, and the automatic quality control procedures screen that out. But it looks like this one slipped through, and that in the algorithms that those different apps use for your phone, they saw, major particulate matter and nitrogen dioxide and put that on the map. And people, I think a lot of those apps that give alerts all of a sudden trigger alerts to say, hey, your air quality is really bad. And I mean, because, some pollutants like particulate matter you can see. So, sometimes that air will have that kind of yellow twinge to it, and kind of like what we saw from the wildfire smoke. But other types of pollutants like ozone, for example, you can't see. So there's not necessarily like, a visual confirmation that people can have, right? Like if you get like today, if we were to get a ping that says major blizzard in Chicago, right? Everyone's gonna look at their phone and be like, must be a wrong thing, right? But with air quality, it's a lot harder to validate, and so a lot of people were starting to freak out to say, oh, well, what's going on with this?
Yeah. So just to clarify, it seems to be an issue with the sensor itself, maybe mismeasuring or just like not quite getting the thing, and then the information goes down the line and ends up on your phone incorrect.
That's right. Yeah. So instruments, even the best, highest quality scientific instruments that we use to make weather measurements, air quality measurements, things like that, they can fail either catastrophically, in which case they start putting out junk data and they have to be replaced, or for whatever reason, they decide that they're going to fail on an observation, and then they'll kick back in and it'll be good. We'll see this, like I mentioned, for Temperature every once in a while, if you see on like the morning news temperature maps, they'll be in the Loop, it'll be 80 degrees, and Bolingbrook, it'll be 1,000 degrees, right? And every once in a while, something like that'll happen, and we just kind of know, okay, this is just an observation error. We'll be back to normal. But like I mentioned with air quality, it was a lot more problematic because people aren't as comfortable with, the visual confirmation of air quality, and B, there aren't that many solid data sources of air quality that you can go to verify to make sure this is actually something that's correct.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about sort of who's monitoring and kind of how that works. But I want to start with a really basic question, because what people are seeing on their phone, often they'll see AQI,
Yeah.
air quality index. What exactly is that? How should we be reading it? And what is sort of normal for this time of year around Chicago?
Yeah, so air quality index is the EPA's, the Environmental Protection Agency's sort of index that they use that brings together multiple forms of pollutants or pollutant measurements in the air. So it includes particulate matter. It also often includes nitrogen dioxide or NO2, which is a significant pollutant, and as well as ozone. And so what they'll do is they'll put all of that information together into one indicator for air quality. So what that means is that the AQI could be triggered based off of really high particulate matter one day, or be triggered based off particularly high, let's say, ozone the next day. Typically, we'll see in Chicago, especially this time of the year when we have a lot of mixing in the atmosphere, so pollutants that are emitted at the surface tend to get kind of diluted out throughout the air. We see most days in the green category of AQI, which is a level of 0 to 50.
So when you talk about the sort of mixing that's
Yeah.
happening, do you mean sort of, for example, like spring in Chicago, we've got rain, we've got wind, we've got lots of things churning up? Is that am I kind of on the right track there of kind of why
Yeah.
all that gas and stuff might be churning up and out instead of hanging out where we're breathing it in?
Well, think of it like water, right? Because the air is a fluid, just like water is. It's gas instead of liquid. But so imagine that you have like a gallon of bleach as your pollutants. Well, if you pour that bleach in your kiddie pool, that's going to be a problem. If you pour it in Lake Michigan, you shouldn't do that, but it's going to be less of a problem because you're diluting that pollutant, because there's just more of the water to kind of dilute it out. And the thing is that it's not necessarily the simple presence of the pollutant that harms us physically, it's the concentration. And so what that means is that when we have the majority of the pollutants that are affecting us on a day-to-day basis in our air, in Chicago, but also downstate, are emitted at the surface. They're from the cars, they're from the ships, the trucks, air conditioning, whatever it may be. And so if those pollutants can, what we call, mix throughout the atmosphere, so that you can either go up vertically, and you can think about the atmosphere as a column, and they can mix throughout all that air, or they can go horizontally, be blown to Indiana or to wherever else. Now you're taking that concentration of pollutants and you're dispersing it over a large area, again, either vertically or horizontally. And so even though the pollutants are still there, they're diluted to the point where it's less harmful. And that's actually why we see certain cities in the US and globally tend to have just inherently higher air quality problems, or more air quality problems, like Los Angeles and Salt Lake City, not necessarily at least just because they have more pollution, but because certain times of the year, the atmospheric conditions there are really conducive to just keeping all those pollutants there. It can't mix very well. And so it's more of a climate problem necessarily than what we have in, for example, in Chicago.
So then, is there a time of year where air quality is especially poor in Chicago?
In general, we can see poor air quality in the winter more often, because we can get the right stable environment for that, where we're not getting a lot of mixing. And then in the summer, during periods of time when we have high pressure. And high pressure basically means that the air is sinking down from the top of the atmosphere to the surface. It creates high pressure at the surface where we are. And that sinking motion not only stops the pollutants from rising and mixing throughout the atmosphere, but also generally think about a pretty warm, if not hot, summer day where you're not getting much of a breeze in Chicago. Those are your high pressure days.
So not necessarily those like crazy muggy days that are super
Not
like humid and wet. What does it feel like, I guess, outside to the average person on those
Well, that's the
days?
thing. You can't really feel the air quality necessarily,
Hmm.
other than the really, really bad days, like with the wildfire smoke. The humidity, it can make a difference. It's not as much related.
Hmm.
So it's really just the those summer days when it's hot, we're not getting a breeze. Those are the ones where oftentimes you'll see the poor air quality. With ozone in particular, the pollutants that are released with especially car traffic and internal combustion engines makes ozone more effectively when temperatures are at their highest. So what that means is that's the hottest days when we'll often see ozone at its highest level. The problem with that is that if people are working, playing, living outside, they're not only dealing with the stress that comes from extreme heat, but it's compounded with the stress that comes from higher ozone and higher pollution levels. So oftentimes we'll see poor air quality on the same days, the same time that we see, heat advisories and warnings.
Hey, it's executive producer Simone Alicea here, and I want to let you know about what's happening at the North Shore Center for the Performing Arts in Skokie. They've got a packed season with some unique shows that I don't think you'll want to miss. If you got a mom who's a Taylor Swift fan, on Mother's Day, May 11th, they're running Taylor Shines The Laser Spectacular. Yes, that is a laser light show set to T Swift hits. Swifties are also going to have another chance to celebrate her music in September when Vitamin String Quartet performs arrangements of Taylor Swift songs from Bridgerton, so you can live out your Bridgerton ball fantasies. If you're looking for something a little more contemplative, Bill W. and Dr. Bob opens May 30th. It's about the actual founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's a raw, moving, and inspiring story. But of course, you know me, I'm all about the games. So I've got my eye on Clue, a walking mystery in July. It's a live-action, interactive experience inspired by the board game, and come on, I absolutely think I could solve the mystery, assuming I'm not the one who did it, I guess. I'd much rather solve the mystery. You can check out the full lineup and grab your tickets now at northshorecenter.org.
I talk about my moms all the time on the show, so y'all know how much I love Mama T, but I'm gonna be real, buying gifts for her can be a little tough, right? When she sees something, she like it, she just get it. So for her recent birthday, I needed something that said, I appreciate you, I love you, I'm thinking about you all the time, and I ultimately landed on the Aura frame. It's a digital picture frame. In fact, it's the best digital photo frame according to the people over at Wirecutter. My mom sees it every day on the table in her entryway. I've uploaded photos of some of our favorite family moments together, like a huge throwback of all of us together at Kalahari up in the dunes, a recent one with my siblings and my mom at a Bulls game. I got a picture with our grandparents. Plus, anybody can add pictures from wherever they live, and she'll see them almost immediately and know we're thinking about her. Aura has a great deal for Mother's Day coming up. For a limited time, listeners can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off plus free shipping on their best-selling Carver matte frame. That's Aura, A-U-R-A, frames.com, promo code CityCast. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply.
So I want to talk a little bit about who is monitoring air quality in Chicago. We talked about these EPA sensors, but when we're talking about who is monitoring, are these primarily public institutions? Is it private companies? How is that working?
It's sort of a mishmash. So I would say kind of the stalwart, the big player in air quality monitoring that is operational. So we can, you can see what it is right now. Everybody can see it. The data is available publicly, is the EPA. However, there are only a handful of stations around the city of Chicago. And when you get down here in central Illinois, we have one station, maybe two stations in Champaign, Urbana, and then we have to drive 40 or 50 miles to the next station. So they're fairly sparse, even compared to weather stations. And when you think about kind of the heterogeneity of the landscape around the city of Chicago, and especially the differences in pollution, neighborhoods that have more industrial or truck traffic, those that border I-90, I-94, those kind of places are going to have higher pollution. So what the EPA stations really do is they kind of set the baseline. Like, it's not going to be able to capture the difference in air quality between Lincoln Park and Chatham. It's going to be able to give you, kind of generally speaking, compared to the last few days, compared to this time last year, what's the city of Chicago dealing with?
And again, that's kind of vaguely what you're going to be seeing on your weather app.
Generally speaking, yeah, that's kind of the baseline data on your weather app. The other sources of information, one is Chicago specific, and that is kind of the Array of Things, or the Internet of Things, which is run by Argonne and Northwestern. So they have dozens of these kind of little bitty environmental monitoring stations. Most of them are actually hooked up to light poles and stoplights. And they're monitoring air quality as well. But if you search Chicago Array of Things or environmental monitoring, something like that, it'll pop up, and you can see near real-time data. That is, because it's several dozen stations instead of just a handful of stations, it definitely makes a bigger difference when it comes to looking at differences, neighborhood scale differences in air quality. Now, I am not sure if that data is getting into the Apple and Android apps. That's something that, because those apps, it's not like they're super secretive, but they don't have their algorithms publicly available. The other part is increasingly people are going with private companies that make personal air quality monitors for indoor or outdoor air quality. One of the best well-known is Purple air quality monitors. And if you look up, Purple air quality, they'll have their map of people who monitor air quality, again, either indoors or outdoors. It's just private citizens who post their information online. And so you can get real-time feeds of what the air quality is, either inside or outside of somebody's apartment. And that kind of helps fill in the gaps between the EPA stations, for sure. But again, it's depending on people not only buying the monitor, which is anywhere between $100 and $300, but also making that information available. I will say, though, that it's not just the Purple air quality monitor. There's many other companies that make these. If it makes sense financially, it can be a decent investment to have at least some kind of air quality monitor. I mean, most of us have carbon monoxide monitors in our houses anyway, but these monitors will do particulate matter, nitrogen dioxide, ozone. And the reason, two reasons those can be important. One is that if your circulation on your AC or your fan system is not working properly, you may not be getting the circulation. So in fact, the air quality indoors may actually be worse than air quality outdoors because of that. The second reason is for those who have stovetops, hot water heaters, other types of appliances that run off of natural gas. More and more research is coming out showing that those appliances can actually leak potential air pollutants as well. And so, just from a safety standpoint, having those indoor air quality monitors can be a helpful thing as well.
I think about that a lot as someone with a gas stove and a air conditioning unit whose filter I have not replaced in way too long.
Yeah.
I'm actually looking at a picture of the Array of Things monitor, so people can actually see them. Like you said, they're kind of mounted, and they're like I don't know, like large pine cones.
Yes.
Like they're white, and they've got these like kind of layers to them. And so I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye out for those. I mean, from your perspective as somebody who is obviously studying climate change and thinking about kind of what is useful for people, what do you think would be sort of the ideal number of air quality monitors and access to that information? Like, if your dreams came true and we had adequate monitoring across Chicago and Illinois, what would that look like for you?
Oh, this is one of those things that I get asked that a lot with things like rainfall too. And it's like, it's always the more the better, but in reality with air quality, it would be nice to have at least one outdoor standard air quality station or monitor for every census tract. So when we kind of describe areas geographically, we think about counties, cities, municipalities. One of the finest, kind of the smallest spatial structures is the census tract. But what that means is that because if we had one monitor per census tract all across the state, we could properly fill in those gaps in rural environments where we just simply have no observation. And we know that some types of agricultural inputs on fields can create similar types of air quality problems, but we just don't have those sensors there outside of the kind of major cities in central and southern Illinois. And in urban areas, especially the Chicagoland area, like I mentioned, the heterogeneity, the diversity of landscapes means that even just one neighborhood over, you could be dealing with a completely different situation. And so I love to see that. I mean, that would be hundreds of air quality monitors all across the state. But I think more importantly, just as importantly, is that data is consistent and is publicly available. And that's the big thing. I mean, if we have to depend on everybody spending $300 to know how much risk they're at for, asthma and emphysema and things like that, that's not a sustainable model for public health. So having more publicly available, good quality air quality monitors is something that is should be a major priority. Not just, like I said, not just in urban areas certainly, but also in rural parts of the state too.
Yeah, you can imagine. I mean, I live on the north side of Chicago near the lake, but I imagine my decision making about should I wear a mask, should I go run outside, or, if I have questions about asthma or health problems would be very different if I could actually see and have the data if I lived on, say, the southwest side of Chicago near Midway Airport. What air quality differences might look like. A census tract, as you mentioned, typically has around 4,000 people in it, although that can range. It is sort of interesting to think about what it would be like if you could really kind of track where you live and where you go. So I think some factors that contribute to poor air quality are probably obvious to Chicagoans. We've got our traffic, we've got our airports. But what are some of the other factors that maybe are less obvious?
Yeah, so in industrial manufacturing is a big one. Putting out different types of particulate matter, as well as kind of the secondary pollutants that can then combine with kind of naturally occurring chemicals or molecules in the air to make other types of pollutants that could be harmful for us. One of the big things, and I think this was banned in California just a few years ago, but kind of the small engines, especially the two-cycle engines. Historically, the emissions restrictions on small engines were far less stringent than they are for larger vehicles, truck engines, for example. Just your typical lawn equipment or small engines can create problems as well. And then different types of materials that we apply to the ground. So things like fertilizers and chemicals for landscape management. I know there's still some, I'm not sure if Chicago does it, but there's still cities that do kind of regular spraying for mosquitoes and things like that. Those can combine, have chemical reactions with the air to make for some problematic pollutants. But, in general, the biggest ones are transportation kind of in general and energy power plant emissions.
As we talked about, Chicago doesn't really suffer from sort of like regular long bouts of poor air quality in the same way that some other cities do, particularly, big wildfire cities. How is sort of the future of Chicago's air quality looking as we do think about climate change and other sort of trends that we see?
Yeah, well, there's mixed is really the answer. So in one sense, moving away from coal-fired power plants improves air quality. And so especially when we offload the energy supply from solar, for wind, for nuclear, each of those types of power or energy production have limitations. But one of the major benefits of all of them is very little air pollution that is created.
And Illinois, a leader in nuclear in particular.
That's right. We've historically been a leader in nuclear. And so that's put us at an advantage when it comes to cleaning up air. as well as carbon emissions for climate change. So that's one trend that is likely going to continue. And so that will help continue improving air quality, as well as a move to electrification of vehicles. So seeing more EVs on the road, having commercial traffic, especially moving to EVs, will greatly improve local neighborhood scale air quality because we're not going to be seeing those emissions directly from the tailpipes. And so that's also quite a benefit. On the downside, increased wildfire activity in the West. The wildfire season is growing. It's becoming longer, more intense. Means that we will likely see more of those sort of brief, ephemeral, poor air quality periods because of wildfire smoke. Now, it's not going to be a constant thing, like you mentioned, in some of our Western cities that just deal with it from, July to October. But, think about 2024, 2023 as an example, where we just had those periods of time with very poor quality air. It's likely something that we're going to be dealing with more frequently in the future. And then also issues with heat, like I mentioned before, warmer summers mean higher ozone pollution. And actually, one thing I didn't mention yet was biologicals in the air. So warmer winters in Chicago sounds great, but that expanded growing season means that we have a longer period of the pollen release from trees and plants. And we don't think of pollen as a pollutant, unless, of course, you're like me and you have seasonal allergies, and then it's definitely a pollutant because it ruins your day. So those are things that we're also likely going to be seeing higher pollen counts more consistently because of that. So like I said, mixed in general, but certainly something that we want to keep and have the best air quality information so that we know when we're expecting those kind of potentially hazardous situations.
It's funny that you mentioned pollen because we haven't really talked in this conversation sort of about like the individual physical effects that people feel when air quality is poor. And right, I think allergies are so immediate for people of you're stuffy, you are sneezy, you can't breathe. To zoom out a little bit here, you are the state climatologist. Your expertise is in sort of climate writ large. What can air quality tell us about bigger climate trends?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the air quality in a single place is going to be pretty variable. And it really needs to be taken in the context of that location. And so air quality in Chicago can tell us more about growth, demand, the population growth, trends in transportation and development, and when the interstate ripped through a neighborhood before, those kind of things. Whereas those cities, those places that are suffering from climate change trends that are related more directly with air quality, like wildfire, places like Boise or Los Angeles, those sort of places, those are where the trends in air quality really do have more of a climate change component to them. A lot of times we focus on temperature and precipitation when it comes to climate change and storms, hurricanes, that sort of thing. But air quality is an important factor as well. And like I mentioned with the heat and the ozone, it can be a compounding factor. So not only we're dealing with these weather hazards, but having air quality as a problem as well.
Well, and it occurs to me too that if some of these air quality issues are more directly related to climate in these Western cities, but that fire smoke ends up blowing over here, then it becomes our problem too.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just another example of how everything is connected. We could think of as home insurance rates, right? And what's hazards that happen 10 states away affect home insurance rates here, and right, food supply. And I mean, everything is connected now. So it is an important point. And I think we were reminded of that a couple of years ago, that what happens in places like California and Alberta doesn't necessarily stay there.
Well, Trent, I really appreciate you breaking this all down. Trent Ford is the state climatologist and a researcher at the University of Illinois. Thanks so much again for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Simone. Really appreciate it.
And some good news to get you through. I just want to thank everyone who signed up to become a CityCast Chicago neighbor during our spring campaign. We are so grateful for your support and that you're willing to contribute to keep this whole thing going. If you were already a member, have been supporting us, I want to thank you too. And I want to invite you to welcome some newcomers into the fold, especially Bronwyn S., Kimberly H., Taliba F., Cameron C., Gabriel R., Heather W., Emily H.M., Daniel J.R., Melissa E., Julie A., Steve D., and Al M. I am looking forward to seeing all of you at our next members-only event. If you didn't get a chance to sign up during this campaign, that's okay. The link is staying the same. You can always become a CityCast Chicago neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. Again, you know it, you love it. It's membership.citycast.fm. Again, later this week, we're going to be dropping a special sponsored episode with the Minocqua Visitors Bureau, which you're definitely going to want to hear if you're planning any spring and summer getaways. Minocqua is just north of Madison, Wisconsin, and is home to lots of fun stuff, but I'm not going to give it all away just yet. Just make sure you keep an eye out on our feed. That's it for today here at CityCast Chicago. We'll be back bright and early tomorrow, and we'll talk to you then.